One viewer told me, I don't like what you say about the USA because it's 100% true. There are dozens of reasons that you should leave the United States and never look back. I did it. I don't regret it. Today we're covering some of the lesser known reasons why you should leave. And before we get into more than a dozen reasons, including many we've never talked about before, what's interesting is that the Richard Nixon Foundation recently took a poll where they said, do you think the political system as it currently stands is corrupt? And 93% of Americans said yes. We've been saying that for years. You just had a presidential election where it cost billions of dollars just to be elected president. Forget all the other races. It is the most corrupt country in the world. It's just that you can't participate. And the corruption at the highest levels has been legalized. So much so that even CIA spies are saying they plan to leave.
For 7 years, I was working undercover as a spy. And I needed to know how to manipulate, how to live and operate without ever being detected, and how to collect secrets.
And so if you're watching this and saying, why would I leave my country? Why don't we just vote and make it better? Let me remind you, as someone who retraced his ancestry earlier this year, that your ancestors probably left somewhere else where they said, this can't be fixed. We want a better opportunity. We want more opportunities for jobs and to have work. We want freedom, whether it's personal, religious, whatever else. Where your ancestors came from wasn't working for them, and they didn't stay and fight. They didn't keep voting for different politicians. They made a list of the things they didn't like, and they chanced at moving to a new place. The good news is if you leave the US forever, you can always undo forever. I gave myself the chance for years to come back, and I never wanted to. Finally gave up the citizenship, burned that bridge. But you don't have to in this modern age. Move somewhere else and never come back. But what I'd like you to admit to yourself is if you look back throughout the course of US history, not a very good idea to trust any one politician. If you like Trump, you shouldn't trust Trump to save your life. You're going to save your life. If you don't like Trump, would Kamala have been any different? You have to take control. And what I realize is these reasons that we're going to talk about aren't going to go away just because one person got in power. So let's begin. The first thing that really upset me recently when this came across my news headlines was one about civil asset forfeiture. You've seen police across the United States for years. They pull people over. Someone's carrying cash. Maybe they're going to buy a car. Maybe they're doing some kind of deal. They take the cash and they file a big case. U.S. government versus $100,000 in cash. This is a cause that both libertarians, right-wing and left-wing people have gotten behind, where even if you go to the bank depositing too much cash from your burrito shop, you might get a knock on the door from the U.S. government. And it got worse recently. They finally suspended a program, too little too late in my opinion, where plainclothes officers at the airport just followed you around, got on the plane with you, hey, I want to look at your bag. And when you said no, they'd take you off the plane, they detain your bag, and people were missing their flights. It was all illegal. And now it's stopped. But a country that can consistently get itself into trouble with FBI going to a private security box place. They're looking for one guy's stuff. They open up and take everyone's stuff. And it takes people years to fight the FBI and get their stuff. This is a country you're supposed to be free. You're supposed to be able to keep your stuff. And so many issues with carrying cash, putting money in the bank, traveling. You don't have a lot of those privileges anymore. Let's go to number two. Some of these are things that people in the comment section have sent in. Qualified immunity. Sounds like kind of a left-wing kind of thing. Oh, the police shouldn't be able to do whatever the hell they want. Well, it's a libertarian thing. In the United States, the police can pretty much do whatever they want. I'm not saying the police are always wrong, but here's what I will tell you. I felt uncomfortable in the United States, certainly going to the airport. It is a police state at the airport, and I will tell you, pretty much every other airport in the world feels more comfortable than a U.S. airport, just in how they talk to you, how they treat you, but just being out in public. In the rare, run-ins where you'd walk past the police, or the police would be driving around. It feels uncomfortable in the U.S. I've come up with the concept of hard freedoms, which is what the U.S. claims to have. We have a constitution. I'll come back to that in a minute. We have these things written down. Don't often follow it, but soft freedom is, our culture is we just don't screw with people. Why would I bother a guy for something? Yeah, he's not doing anything wrong, leave him alone. You don't have that soft freedom in the U.S. There is increasingly a presumption of you are guilty until proven innocent, in all kinds of different matters. And I will tell you, it feels a lot more uncomfortable dealing with the police in the U.S. than anywhere else. I have great respect for the police, a lot of the places where I go and spend time, because they're pretty cool, they're pretty helpful. They actually go out of their way to help you and actually serve the community. You don't have that in the U.S. anymore. Number 3 is some of the highest healthcare costs in the world, and I'll add to that some of the worst value in the world. Now you see, CEO, United Healthcare, shot and killed in New York. People are upset about this. And you know what's even worse? Add this to the reasons to leave if you're successful, is people are cheering for that. Good, they got him, they said. But let's talk about high healthcare costs. You're getting very low value for your money. We've told you for years. Some counties in Texas are tying Somalia for various healthcare metrics, like infant mortality, for example. Access to care in some of those places is not great. Now you can say, hey, what do I care? I live in Dallas, Texas. I don't live in some far-flung county. Well, if your country is such a successful, great first world country and the best country in the world, shouldn't everybody have access to good health care, even if they're willing to pay? And so you go to Singapore, you go to Colombia, you'll find in pretty much all corners of these countries that we talk about, those are just 2 that we talk about in kind of varying extremes, you'll find that pretty much everybody has access to the same quality of care. Now, there may be more private clinics. We have Nomad Capitalist Live, our 4-day event every year. It's in Kuala Lumpur. I've spent time there for over a decade. Prince Court Medical Center, one of the best places in the world. You just pay out of pocket, amazing care, amazingly efficient, amazingly affordable. It's one reason to come to Nomad Capitalist Live. You're going to have more of those clinics in a big city like Kuala Lumpur than in a smaller city, but in most of the countries that I spend time, quality of care is pretty equally distributed. Even in frontier markets like Cambodia, it wasn't 10 or 12 years ago, it's getting better. So if Cambodia and Somalia are beating parts of Texas, then it's really kind of hard to say that the country is the best. And I'm a capitalist, I'm a free market guy, but it's pretty ridiculous to say you're going to pay the kind of taxes that you pay, especially as a successful person where you're paying into the 40%. And you will still be paying into the 40% under Trump, or very close to it, and getting nothing for it. At least in other countries, they get free healthcare, free university. Now, I'd rather pay lower taxes and not get the free stuff and pay for it, as I do. I left the United States and I live in a collection of other countries where my tax burden is very small. When I need healthcare, I go to Prince Court and I just pay. But you don't get that choice in the U.S. You pay very high taxes and you get very poor healthcare response. Obscenely overpriced. I'm telling you, people came to Nomad Capitalist Live the last 2 years in Kuala Lumpur. We saw them at Prince Court. We literally sold out their executive health screenings for a couple of weeks around the event. So many of them came, and we heard stories. People said this would have cost me $10,000 in the U.S. to get all these tests done. They paid $400 in Malaysia. UK-trained doctors, very efficient, very affordable, smiles on the faces. They're getting pushed to the front of the line because it's the executive health screening. I mean, they paid for the whole trip to come to our event just by going there. Yeah, does that exist in some places in the U.S.? I don't think quite as good, quite frankly, in most of them. But for the average person, healthcare is very expensive. There's no need for it to be that way, but it is. Number 4, you have the largest prison population, larger per capita than China. So for everyone talking about, China, they put everyone in prison, well, the U.S. does more. Interesting thing, as we watch the Biden administration wrap up, Biden's done this pivot from we got to go after the super predators in the 90s and all the rules about putting people in jail for drug use, commented the same thing. Now it's, should we pardon those people? Should we give them clemency? Well, a lot of bad policies in the U.S., I think, quite frankly, made pretty emotionally. In these societies like the U.S., they just kind of go with the tide, and the tide for some time now has been lock everybody up, and that they have. Quite frankly, I don't worry, about being in other countries. Aren't you afraid of political retribution if you say the wrong thing? No, a lot more worried about that in the United States, actually. I'll go to number 5, no free speech. Do you have free speech at some level? Sure you do. By the way, I live all over the world. I never really feel like I can't say certain things, and to the extent that I'm not criticizing the government of that country, it's because I'm pretty well distributed. I don't really need to go to other countries and criticize their governments. I go to the places where I like the governments, And if I don't like the way that their banks run, I don't bank there. I just live there. So I distribute it myself. Imagine, Julian Assange is a journalist and reveals illegal activity, and somehow he's the criminal. But here's what came out in one of the court documents from his now settled case. In 2020, the U.S. prosecutor, Gordon Kromberg, told a British court, in trying to get Assange over to the U.S., that the U.S. could argue that foreign nationals are not entitled to protections under the First Amendment, at least as it concerns national defense information. And so they're setting the precedent for, oh, you're not really one of us. No. The Constitution was always about we're all equal under the law, and it wasn't always about citizens necessarily. So once you say that there's no free speech for a certain group of people for certain conditions, you open the door to say we don't have free speech. Listen, all the countries that Americans say, I wouldn't live there, they don't have free speech. Yeah, you know what? There's certain things you can't say in the UAE. There's a smaller number of things you can't say in Singapore. Do I entirely, as a libertarian guy, agree with that? Not entirely. But I also look at the results. I look at a certain amount of social cohesion. I look at how people aren't at each other's throats in these places the way they are in the US. And I'm not saying the ends justify the means, but I'm saying if I'm comparing the US where they pretend to have free speech absolutism, but find all these little, loopholes whenever they can, yeah, I'll take the better result where they're at least honest about what they are. And quite frankly, again, libertarian, but pragmatically happy to say, am I going to Singapore where I have my wealth held and standing up and complaining about how things are run? No, that's the benefit of go where you're treated best. You choose the place you go where you're treated best rather than staying in the US because I'm afraid to go anywhere or I'm going down with the ship. Why not choose where you go the best? Why not choose where you're treated best? Someone else sent this one in, number 6, one of our viewers, fourth wave feminism. Now, you can take that as you want, but I will tell you this. When I go around the world, and when we have Westerners, not just Americans, but Westerners on our team, friends of mine, etc., when they come to the places that I spend time, largely in the emerging and non-Western world, they're like, where are the gender wars? Why don't men and women hate each other here? What's going on? I'm not saying that there aren't typical male-female disagreements, but the gender wars, we interviewed Christina Kahneman on this at Nomad Capitalist Live. You can watch that interview. There are places where, yeah, men like the women, women like the men, people just get along, and you don't have all the people at each other's throats in that way. And so you've seen this whole collection of people who've decided we're not going to date in our own countries anymore. And so that's one way you can be diversified, is date somewhere else where you don't have disagreements with the culture. There's a lot of things that people culturally disagree with. We've had more people calling us in recent years, clients of ours saying, I never thought I'd call you. I liked the videos. You're an entertaining guy. I never thought I would call, but I don't recognize my own country anymore. And we're still getting that call from the smart ones who realize, okay, maybe they voted for Trump and Trump won, but is that going to change the entire fabric of the culture? No, it's not. And so, a reason to leave is to say the U.S. culture is going in the wrong direction. One guy can get 49.8% of the vote and win, or whatever it was. Doesn't mean the other 50.2% are going to change what they believe in. Maybe they dig in more. And so I think all those kind of culture wars, I'd rather be in a place where there were never any culture wars or people at each other's throats to begin with, both in terms of the dating world or in general. And so number 7, social chaos. Here's a great comment someone said. How can we fix things if we fight over identity, including what people do here, labeling people a coward or brave, instead of focusing on the actual issues? So if you're watching this and saying, well, this guy sounds like he should be more brave, he should have stayed in the US and fixed this. How am I going to fix fourth wave feminism? How am I going to fix high healthcare costs? I mean, you saw what one guy did, and I absolutely do not agree with this. One guy said, here's how we fix healthcare costs. I'm going to shoot and kill the CEO of a healthcare company. That's how powerless people feel. One person's I'm not going to fix qualified immunity. I'm watching videos from civil asset forfeiture. They're harassing people on the planes for their bags. How am I going to fix that? By what? You see these guys in the Free State Project, they move to New Hampshire, and what do they get pulled over? They get traffic tickets just so they can go to court and sing the opera for an hour? Ridiculous. Your life is more valuable than that. You have a real impact you can make. Your impact in life is fighting with judges in court to prove a point that everyone just thinks you're a nut? Why don't you just go where you're treated best? But this person says we have social chaos because we label people emotionally instead of focusing on the actual issues. He says it's like trying to repair a relationship when your partner is emotionally avoidant and can only issue ultimatums, technically ultimata, the plural of ultimatum, storm out of the room and give you the silent treatment. You can't fix anything with a person like that. How many people have had relationships where, yes, it is fiat by ultimata and storming into the room and silent treatment? That is effectively what happens in the United States, and I see it. I'm in the belly of the beast. We talk about how to get out. A lot more people want to get out than ever before, but obviously you've still got a lot of people who it's emotional for them. They don't like it. They think it's unpatriotic. You're right. I am not patriotic to a country I'm not a citizen of and didn't want to be a citizen of in the first place. Social chaos is what happens when the country you're living in and the people there act like spoiled brats in toxic relationships. How do you fix that? You fix it the same way you fix the toxic relationship. You leave. Number 8, violent crime. You should have stayed and fixed all the violent crime. One of the most violent countries in the world. We're starting to see that major U.S. cities are falling behind a number of South American cities. Now, yes, you've got Tijuana, Mexico, I think right now is one of the most dangerous cities in Latin America. Honduras is a country, the capital, and San Pedro Sula, been very dangerous. El Salvador, though, look at what El Salvador's done. El Salvador's outpacing the U.S. by far in fixing violent crime. You see now some of the people in the new Trump administration going down there. They like President Bukele in El Salvador. What are we going to do to fix violent crime? It's a lot easier to fix it in El Salvador, in a small little country where someone can come in and just be strong and fix it, than in the U.S. with all the bureaucracy and, of course, a much bigger country. You've got a big violent crime problem. Now, you can say, listen, where I live, I don't deal with that. Well, then for all the other reasons, where I live, I also don't deal with it. Except I don't have the other stuff where I live also. I can live in the best neighborhood in Bogota, Colombia, and I feel pretty safe. And yeah, they say don't wear your watch. Yeah, maybe sometimes you do wear your watch and you're still fine. Or you could just choose to go to safe places. We've shown you some of them in our Live Like a King series, from Malaysia to Oman, Armenia, very safe places where they don't have the same violent crime issue. You can send your kids to the store, and people still do. What I love about some of these places, particularly I've talked about this in Eastern Europe, people still open the back door and the kids run out and play. That seems like a vestige of a bygone era in the U.S. And when that crime comes, number 9, you've got this very weird 2-tier justice system. Now, you're seeing in some of the big cities in the U.S., which you could say all solved by moving to the suburbs, no one gets convicted of crimes anymore. You get a little slap on the wrist. But let's talk about some of the stuff that I saw when Trump won. And you can say, oh, this is just some guy on social media. This is part of the zeitgeist. Here's a guy saying, I support a new law when Trump's in office that will close all leftist media as anti-American outlets. There's that freedom of speech for you. Those who work for and subscribe to and advertise in these leftist media will be prosecuted as anti-American terrorists. Send them to Guantanamo. Now, is this guy some kind of loon? Yes. Right. This guy's a loon who's emboldened. He's a part. I'm not saying it's the majority, but he is part of a group. His guy just won, and now he's emboldened to come out and say, yeah, if you're left-wing, you should be put in prison as a terrorist. Yeah, because that's not a slippery slope. You don't have to be a left-wing person to think that's a problem. Yes, of course, some people call that out, and some people agreed with it. And the idea that there aren't people out there. Okay, which number? Okay, we're getting to number 11, public education failures. There it is right there. Not only do I think it's grammatically incorrect, but not only are people at each other's throats, not only is it anti-freedom of speech, the very thing that a guy like that would say, oh, the Constitution protects left-wing media outlets from not being labeled as anti-American. I don't think it is satire. I think there is millions of people in the United States who think that the other side should be in prison as terrorists. I really believe that. I think there is a 2-tier justice system. Number 10, most corrupt country for the elites. Have you seen the guy in Congress who got a 238% return in just 1 year? I read a report on that, but prosecutions are rare. Right, because the elites protect the elites. I think that the problem with the U.S., if you're successful, the reason that CEOs get shot in the streets is because people's anger is misplaced. Now, Congress has an approval rating of like 2% or something, but the elites should be the people who were elected who are immune from prosecution. They're talking about the CEO who got shot. Oh, there's an investigation, there was some insider trading. Oh, okay. Hey, listen, if they would have found that out, I'm sure that guy would have gone to jail. And I'm not saying, I don't know what happened, but I'm just saying if something happened, I'm sure being a CEO won't save you. But being a member of Congress will save you. And yet if you're a business leader in the US, if you've got a business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an investor, the average person doesn't like you. The same way they want to put the left-wing crazies in jail as terrorists, I'm sure there's plenty of folks that like to come after you. When I go to the Middle East, when I go to Eastern Europe, when I go to Asia, people still respect success. They don't want to come after you. And they don't think that you're one of the elites just because you're an unconnected businessman. And yet, members of Congress can do insider trading and nobody stops them. It is a corrupt country, but only for the club that George Carlin says you and I are not in. Number 11, public education. U.S. placed 16th out of 81 countries in science. The IMD World Competitiveness Center reports they ranked 12th overall. So those numbers aren't terrible. But for my entire lifetime, the U.S. has been losing to Asia in the rankings. People in many school systems are graduating without knowing basic math, without knowing basic history. And then, of course, the issue now is they're teaching stuff that you may not approve of. If you're conservative, maybe Trump gets rid of some of that. But here's the reality: in a federalist system, the states are going to do what they want to do. And by the way, let's go the other side. As a libertarian, I don't want the 10 Commandments in front of my school either. So, most countries can play education pretty straight down the line. Here's some of the big ones, though. How's a $36 trillion debt? And you're adding $1 trillion every 100 days or so. Here's the quote: the U.S. national debt cannot be repaid. Again, I don't see Trump solving that. They're going to cut $2 trillion from the budget. How are they going to do that while increasing the military? You could just end Social Security and keep everyone's money and admit it's a Ponzi scheme. I guess you could do that. The public indebtedness is not going to go away. The same Donald Trump, by the way, who in 1999, when I followed him, said we should have a one-time 14% tax on everybody rich to pay off the national debt. Since then, of course, it's become pretty much impossible to do. Number 13, the government spies on you. Edward Snowden, there's talk of a pardon for him. He says law enforcement is spying on thousands of Americans' mail. And you've seen that, how they scan your mail, how they listen to your phone calls, how they go and get into your bags at the airport, and they force you to do that in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And for all that, number 14, it costs $4.5 million, $4.4 million over a lifetime now to live the American dream. How many Americans will make that? Not many. That's why they're so angry. They want to lock up their opponents and they want to shoot them in the leg and kill them. And so number 15, for all that talk of a constitution, I introduced the concept of hard freedom versus soft freedom over the years. Yeah, I'm sure there's places where I've lived all around the world that many Americans would sniff at, where they don't have the most robust constitution. But guess what? If the country's small, if they never had tons of power, if they never ruled the world as an empire, then and they just don't care to, then culturally speaking, there's going to be a softer touch. One guy told me in Latin America, yeah, I just feel better here. And feelings only go so far, but you can feel when things are oppressive. You can feel when the government has overreach. And you can go to places where the government's just like, we can't handle everybody, so just kind of do what you want. Right? We'll provide the basic services. Very libertarian. And so the idea that the Constitution is going to protect you, they violate the Fourth Amendment. This guy up here wants to violate the First Amendment. All the amendments basically get violated. I mean, the Constitution is a piece of paper. They trample on it every day. And so one guy said that he lives in China. The streets are clean. The cities are safe. Excellent public infrastructure. Rising living standards. Great food. But a distinct lack of political freedoms. Boo-hoo-hoo, he says. I don't get to vote every 4 years between corrupt jerk number 1 and corrupt jerk number 2. Somehow I can live without that cosmetic freedom. Now, let's refrain from the if you don't like it, move to China. No thanks. I don't entirely agree with him, other than yes, for all the taxes you pay in China, you do get cleaner streets, safer cities, better infrastructure, and yes, the living standards are rising, as are the life expectancies. In the U.S., it is the one Western country life expectancies are dropping. We've talked about that for years. Health is in the toilet. And so the idea that China has to be the place, no. Go where you're treated best. Not go where you're treated better. But there are these reasons and more. If you have one, leave a comment below. But it's go where you're treated best. You don't have to go to China to leave the U.S. You can go to Malaysia, and sure, they may not have the robust First Amendment that the U.S. does. I have nothing to complain about in Malaysia. And I don't have the same problems that he talks about in China, but I do have cleaner streets, good infrastructure, very good food. He also mentions that. You can choose the place for you that works. And yet, voting's not going to change it. You can be happy when your guy wins, but it wasn't you who did that. And so I think that the challenge going forward, if you have a U.S. passport, if you live in the U.S., as BRICS and other regional alliances grow, they're tired of being told what to do. And your business will be impacted, even if you don't directly deal with international clients. I bet your business deals with someone who deals with international clients. Even if your job isn't for a foreign company, I bet they get part of their revenue from foreign companies. The world's pretty connected these days, and pissing off half the world's population, probably the best thing to do. It seems like that's the path the U.S. will continue to go down. And so for me, I've said for years, I'd rather be St. Lucian as I am than American, because that will allow me to do business wherever I want in the world much better. And I want to do business around the world because for these aforementioned 15 reasons and far more, not to mention the taxes, not to mention many other things, I found it's much better to leave the U.S. forever. And I think if you did too, you could find a place, as our clients have, from the dozens of tax-friendly, more free countries around the world that you'd feel comfortable in. We'd love to have you as a client at nomadcapitalist.com/apply. We'd love for you to come and join us at Nomad Capitalist Live in Kuala Lumpur and see just how much better it can be overseas. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/live and add your reason to leave forever below. This is Oman, and today we're showing you luxury living in its beautiful capital city of Muscat. Now we're going to show you one of the sexiest luxury villas here in Oman. We're going to show you how to live like a king